Hello, my friend. Welcome to another episode of the English Talk community. I'm really happy you are here. Yes, I'm talking directly to you. Whether you are sitting on the bus, walking to work, cooking in your kitchen, or maybe just lying on your bed with your headphones on, I know your time is valuable, and the fact that you chose to spend these minutes with me means a lot. And trust me, you are in the right place. Today, we are going to talk about something that could completely change the way you feel during a job interview in English. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt your hands sweating before you speak English in front of someone? Maybe your voice starts to shake a little, your heart goes faster, and you start thinking, what if I forget a word? What if I make a mistake? Now, imagine this situation in a real job interview. Sitting across from a person you have never met before, maybe in a shiny office or maybe through a video call, and hearing that first question. You know the answer in your head, but saying it in English feels like climbing a mountain with heavy shoes. Have you ever been there? I know this feeling very well, and I can tell you right now, you are not alone. Thousands of people listening to this podcast have been exactly where you are. That's why today's episode is so important. Because in job interviews, words matter. Not complicated words, not fancy grammar. What matters is how clear you are and how confident you sound. And yes, confidence can be real, or it can be built like a skill. I always say this, confidence is not something you wait for, it's something you practice. And the good news is, you can practice it every single day with small changes in the way you speak. In this episode, I'm going to share with you some things you should never say in a job interview in English, and more importantly, what you can say instead. These small changes can help you sound more professional and give a better impression, even if your English is not perfect. Because here's the truth. It's not about speaking perfect English. It's about speaking English that works. And works means the other person understands you, remembers you, and sees you as the kind of person they want to work with. Before we begin, I want you to take a deep breath. Really. Inhale and exhale slowly. Good. If you are listening to me right now, you're already taking action in your English journey, and that's something you should be proud of. Many people dream about improving their English, but they never take that first step. You are already ahead, right here, right now, listening and practicing. Now, let's talk about mistakes. One of the biggest fears people have is making mistakes. Let me tell you something. Mistakes are not dangerous. They are proof that you are practicing. I make mistakes in my own language sometimes. We all do. What is dangerous is letting fear stop you from trying. In a job interview, many people speak less because they are afraid to make a grammar error or choose the wrong word. But recruiters are not looking for perfect English teachers. They are looking for real people who can communicate ideas clearly and work well with others. So when I share these never-say phrases today, remember, this is not about being perfect. It's about being effective. Let's be honest, job interviews are already stressful in your own language. Add English to the equation, and the stress can double. I remember speaking with a listener from Lisbon. Let's call her Anna, who told me that in her first interview in English, she almost forgot her name because she was so nervous. When the interviewer asked, "Can you tell me about yourself?" she froze for a moment, and in her head, she was thinking in Portuguese and trying to translate everything. By the time she started speaking, she was already feeling unsure. But here's what she learned later. It is much better to prepare and practice simple phrases that you can say naturally than to think of perfect sentences on the spot. And that is exactly what we are doing today, giving you these simple, ready-to-use phrases that you can remember even when your heart is racing. I want you to imagine this. You are in a job interview, maybe in Paris, maybe in Berlin, maybe in New York. The interviewer asks you a question you didn't expect. You take a second to think, but instead of panicking, you use a phrase you already practiced. You see the interviewer nodding, smiling, maybe writing something positive in their notes. This is the power of being prepared with clear, confident words. I also want to tell you a secret. Most interviewers do not expect you to know every answer on the spot. What they really want to see is how you handle difficult situations. If you don't know something, they pay attention to whether you stay calm and try, or whether you panic and give up. This is why some of the never-say phrases we will talk about today are dangerous. They can make you look like you are closing the conversation instead of keeping it alive. And we are going to replace them with language that keeps the door open. While we talk today, I encourage you to imagine yourself in different interview situations. Maybe you are talking to a recruiter in London for a marketing position. Maybe you are on a video call with a company in Amsterdam for a project manager role. Maybe you are sitting in a quiet modern office in Frankfurt for your dream position in design. No matter where you are, the principles are the same. And yes, with the right approach, you can sound confident, even if English is not your first language. Now, I know some people might be thinking, Ben, it's easy for you to say. You speak English fluently. That's true. English is my first language. But here's something important. I have been a beginner before, in other languages, and I know exactly how scary it feels. I remember being in Milan, trying to answer a simple question in Italian, and feeling like my brain just shut down. My mouth was dry, and I was thinking, why can't I say this? I know these words. That's when I realized it's not just about knowing the words. It's about preparing yourself to use them in real time, in real life. This is what I want for you today. And one more thing. Your accent is not a problem. You don't need to sound like someone from London or New York to be successful in an interview. Your accent is part of your identity and can actually be a strength. The key is clarity, making sure the interviewer can understand you without effort. And clarity comes from choosing the right words and practicing how you say them. So here's my suggestion as we go through today's conversation. Listen carefully, and when I give you a phrase, repeat it out loud. Not in your head, but really say it. You might feel a little funny talking to your phone or your computer, but this is how you train your brain and your mouth to work together. The more you practice, the less nervous you will feel in the real situation. Before we move on, I want to ask you for something small that makes a big difference to me and to the community. If you find this episode helpful, take just a moment to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Not only will it help more people find this content, but it also keeps you connected to future episodes where we keep building your confidence, step by step. Remember, learning English is not a race. It's a journey, and we are walking it together. All right. Now that we are relaxed, connected, and ready, let's get into those phrases that can make or break your next interview. Let me share a story with you today about someone I think many of you will relate to. His name is Miguel, and he is from Madrid. Miguel is a friendly, smart young man in his late 20s. He studied computer engineering at university, and he always dreamed about working abroad, especially in a country where he could improve his English while also working in a challenging job. After a few years of experience in Spain, he saw a position open in a technology company in London. The role was exactly what he wanted: software development for innovative projects, international clients, and a modern office environment. When he read the job description, it felt like they had written it just for him. Miguel applied with excitement, but also with a little voice in his head saying, "Your English is not perfect." He hesitated for a moment before sending his application. But then he thought, if I don't try now, when will I? So he prepared his CV in English, practiced a few common interview questions he found online, and wrote down some vocabulary he thought might be important for the conversation. A couple of weeks later, he received an email. The company wanted to schedule an interview with him. His heart beat faster when he read the message. He was thrilled and nervous at the same time. The interview day came faster than he expected. Miguel wore a clean, simple suit, opened his laptop for the video call, and took a deep breath. On the screen appeared a friendly-looking recruiter with a calm smile. They started with some easy greetings, and Miguel relaxed a little. But soon, the recruiter asked a question Miguel wasn't fully prepared for. Can you tell me more about how you solved problems in your last big project? Now, Miguel had experience solving problems. In fact, he had many examples he could share. But at that moment, all of them seemed complicated to explain in English. He looked at the camera, tried to think quickly, and felt a rush of pressure. His mind searched for the right words, but they just didn't come. So, instead of explaining, he simply said, "I don't know." The moment those words left his mouth, he regretted them. The recruiter stayed quiet for a second. That silence felt heavy. Then the interviewer moved on to another question, but Miguel's confidence had already taken a hit. He could see in the recruiter's eyes a subtle change, as if the answer had created a small wall between them. Miguel finished the rest of the interview, answering as best as he could. When the call ended, he closed his laptop and sat there in silence. He remembered in detail the moment he said, "I don't know," and how it had felt so uncomfortable. To him, this one small phrase was harmless. But in the context of a job interview, he started realizing it could send the wrong message. It didn't show that he was thinking, or that he was willing to find a solution. It sounded final, like a door closing. Some days later, Miguel received the company's response. They thanked him for his time but told him they had decided to move forward with another candidate. He wasn't surprised, but he was disappointed. He had hoped his technical skills would be enough, but deep down, he knew that in an interview, how you communicate is just as important as what you know. When Miguel told me this story during one of our community calls, I understood exactly what had happened. I explained to him, and now I'm explaining to you, why "I don't know" can be dangerous in a job interview. First, let's think about what those 3 words sound like to someone hiring for an important role. They don't give extra information. They don't show your attitude. They don't open a conversation. They stop it. A recruiter might wonder if you can think creatively, if you can adapt, or if you have confidence in your own ability to learn. The interesting part is that Miguel knew the answer. He could have explained it in his own language very easily. The problem wasn't knowledge. It was the pressure of speaking in English in a professional situation. That pressure made him choose the quickest way to escape the question. A short reply that ended the moment, but also ended his chance to make a strong impression. I asked Miguel to repeat exactly how he felt at that moment. He said he felt like his brain went blank, and the more he searched for words, the more they seemed to hide from him. If you have ever had this feeling, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's like your mind is full of ideas, but the sentence structure just refuses to appear quickly enough. That's the point where many English learners panic and choose the easiest escape. I don't know. The truth is, recruiters don't expect you to have every answer all the time. What they do expect is that you show some form of engagement with the question. Even if you don't have the exact answer ready, you can show curiosity, willingness to learn, or the ability to think about the topic out loud. This is why phrases like "I don't know" can make such a big impact. They remove all of those possibilities and leave nothing for the interviewer to work with. Miguel later told me that he had practiced only the probable questions for the interview. He had made a list, rehearsed it, and focused on memorizing those answers. But an interview is never a perfect script. There will always be a question you did not expect. And this is where preparation is less about memorizing whole answers and more about practicing ways to respond when you are unsure. For example, learning to say, "That's a good question. Let me think for a moment," buys you time and shows that you are still engaged. It keeps the conversation alive. When Miguel replayed the interview in his mind, he told me he could think of 3 or 4 examples from his previous projects that could have answered that question. In his own language, he could have explained them in detail and with confidence. But because he hadn't practiced explaining those stories in simple English, his brain froze when it was time to speak. It's a situation I have seen many times, and it's why I always tell learners that the goal is not complex, advanced vocabulary. The goal is having ready, natural phrases that can carry you through moments when you feel blocked. Miguel's case also reminded me of something very important about human reactions. When we are nervous, our instinct is often to escape discomfort as fast as possible. If a question feels heavy or confusing, "I don't know," feels like a relief in the moment because it ends the pressure. But later, when you think about it, you realize it also ended your chance to show problem-solving skills, creativity, or adaptability. Exactly the qualities many employers value, even more than technical perfection. Miguel was not less capable just because of that one phrase. But in an interview, first impressions are powerful, and small sentences can carry a lot of weight. This is why paying attention to the way we answer questions in English is so important. It's not only about the words themselves, but also what those words communicate about who we are and how we approach challenges. From that day, Miguel decided to focus not only on technical vocabulary, but also on practicing phrases and strategies for the moments when he didn't have the exact answer ready in his head. He started recording himself answering random interview questions in English, and he paid attention to moments where he hesitated. Every time he replaced "I don't know" with something that showed thinking or willingness to continue the conversation. Over time, this small habit made him more confident, even when the questions were completely unexpected. Miguel's story is one I like to share because it is simple, real, and full of lessons. It shows that sometimes the difference between moving to the next stage of a job interview and receiving that polite rejection email can be as small as a three-word phrase. And the good news is, you can replace that phrase with something better, even with basic English, if you practice before the big moment happens. When I thought about Miguel's story, the first thing that came to my mind was how easily his answer could have been different. He already had the knowledge. He already had the experience. What he didn't have at that exact moment was a ready, safe phrase to carry him through the pressure. I always tell people, when you are in a difficult situation in English, it's not only your vocabulary that helps you, it's having a few rescue phrases in your mind that you can use while you think. These phrases give you time. They show professionalism, and they keep the conversation alive. For example, let's take the moment when the recruiter asked Miguel about solving problems in his last big project. His mind froze. Instead of saying, "I don't know," which closed the topic, imagine if he had said, "I'm not sure, but I can find out." Simple, direct, not complicated grammar, and yet so much more powerful. Why? Because with that sentence, he is telling the recruiter, "I am willing to look for the answer," and "I don't give up when I am not immediately ready." Diki, this is exactly the kind of attitude recruiters want to see. Another option could have been, "That's a good question. I will check and get back to you." This is one of my favorite sentences to teach because it communicates three important things. You respect the question, you are honest about not having the exact answer now, and you promise to follow up. Think about it. This is exactly what many professionals do every day in their jobs. Even native English speakers use it all the time when they are not 100% sure about something in a meeting. It's not only acceptable, it's professional. I want you to imagine yourself in Miguel's place. The question comes. You feel nervous. Instead of letting that nervousness push you into saying, "I don't know," you breathe for a second and use one of these ready phrases. You buy yourself some time to think. You show respect for the recruiter's question. You keep the energy of the conversation moving. And even if you still don't give a full answer right then, you've shown that you are a problem solver. This is exactly what most employers value. The key here is practice. You can understand these sentences when I say them now, but in an interview, you may forget them completely if you never practice them out loud. I always recommend my listeners to use what I call daily English drills. Here's how they work. Every day, give yourself a random question. You can search for common job interview questions online, and practice responding to at least one of them using these positive substitute phrases. For example, if you hear the question, Can you explain how you managed a difficult client? And you can't think of an answer right away? Go to your safety line. That's a good question. I will think about the best example. Tons, the goal is to make these lines automatic, so they come naturally when you feel pressure. This isn't just about language. It's about your image. In every job interview, the recruiter is not only listening to your answer, they're also watching your body language, your tone, and your attitude. A short answer like, "I don't know," communicates something final, maybe even a little defeated. On the other hand, "I'm not sure, but I can find out," shows light in your voice, energy in your attitude, and a sense of responsibility. Employers want people they can trust to go and look for answers, not just give up because they don't have one right now. I want to tell you something interesting. A few months ago, I was speaking to an HR manager from a company in Munich. She told me that during interviews, she doesn't really care if a candidate answers every question perfectly. What she looks for is curiosity and resourcefulness. If someone says, "I would need to find that out, but I have some ideas," it makes her think, this person will try before saying, "It can't be done." That mindset is valuable in any role. If Miguel had replaced "I don't know" with one of these proactive phrases, the recruiter in London might have remembered him as someone with a positive presence. Now, I'm not telling you to pretend you know everything. That's not the point. Honesty is very important, but there's a big difference between being honest and closing a conversation. If you truly don't know something, you can admit it, but add a step forward. Instead of a period at the end of your sentence, think of it as adding a comma and showing what you will do next. This builds trust because it shows you are aware of your limits, but still willing to move beyond them. Let's go back to Miguel in that interview chair. Picture him saying, "I'm not sure, but I can find out by checking with my team." Or, "That's a good question. I'll look into it after our meeting." If you were a recruiter, would you not feel more confident about someone who responds like that? Every answer in an interview is a small window into how you work in real life. If your answer shows teamwork, effort, and problem-solving, you are already communicating your value, even without perfect English. I know some of you might be thinking, "But Ben, what if I forget these phrases in the moment?" That's why I recommend something very practical. Write them down on a small card or in a note on your phone, and review them every day until they feel natural in your mouth. You don't need 20 different phrases. 3 or 4 reliable ones, memorized and practiced, can be enough to cover most situations where you don't have the answer immediately. Here are a few more you can take with you. Let me get back to you on that. I don't have the full details now, but I can explain the process we used. That's an interesting question. Here is what I think so far. Notice how all of these are short, easy to pronounce, and keep the conversation moving in a professional way. None of them require advanced grammar or complicated vocabulary. They just need to sound like they belong to you, which is why saying them aloud as often as possible will make them part of your natural speaking toolkit. One thing I often remind learners is this. In a high-pressure situation, your brain will want to save energy. That means it will reach for the simplest, fastest answer it knows. If the only thing you've ever used in uncertain situations is, "I don't know," then in the interview, that's exactly what you'll say. But if you train yourself to reach for, "I'm not sure, but I can find out," then that will become your quick response. These habits are built in the days and weeks before your interview, not in the moment itself. We also have to talk about tone. The best phrase in the world can sound weak if you say it with a shaky voice and no eye contact. When you practice, think about your delivery. Pause slightly before the phrase, speak it with a steady, friendly tone, and keep your body language open. Even online, body language matters. The way you sit, the way you look at the camera, the way you smile lightly when you speak. All of this helps balance the fact that you might not have the answer yet. I remember telling Miguel to imagine each of these phrases as a bridge. The question is on one side, and your complete answer is on the other. The phrase you use is the bridge that takes you there, even if you have to build more of the path once you start talking. Without that bridge, the gap stays empty, and the conversation falls through. With it, you can keep moving forward without stopping the flow. I could see in Miguel's eyes that this idea made sense to him. He told me he had never thought about an interview answer as something you could build in small steps. But the next time he practiced with me, I noticed how he naturally started using the bridge phrases instead of leaving an empty space. It completely changed the feel of his answers, even before we improved the details of his stories. And that's when I knew he understood. The words you choose in those uncertain seconds can change the entire energy of an interview. Let me tell you about Sophie, a listener from Paris who wrote to me some months ago with a story that really stuck in my mind. Sophie is in her early 30s, friendly, organized, and absolutely passionate about hospitality. She has worked in hotels in Paris since she finished her studies and has always dreamed about taking her career abroad. For her, working in another country was not only about a better position, but also about learning how different cultures approach customer service and creating unforgettable guest experiences. One day, Sophie saw a job listing for a luxury hotel in Dublin. The property was incredible. 5 stars, beautiful architecture, an excellent reputation worldwide. She imagined herself working there, welcoming guests from all over the world, and growing professionally in an international environment. The position was in guest relations, something she was already experienced in. So she felt a mix of excitement and nervous energy as she read through the role requirements. She applied right away. Sophie spent days preparing for the interview, checking the hotel's website, reading recent reviews from guests, and writing down possible answers to questions she thought the recruiter might ask. She even practiced with a friend who spoke English fluently. Sophie's English was decent. She wasn't perfect, but she could express her thoughts most of the time. She believed if she stayed calm, her communication would be enough to show her value. The interview day arrived, and Sophie dressed exactly as she imagined a guest relations professional should look, elegant but approachable. She took a quiet moment before entering the video call to breathe and tell herself she was ready. When the recruiter appeared on the screen, she smiled warmly and greeted him, feeling a little more confident. The conversation started well, with some light small talk about the weather in Dublin and the busy tourism season. Then came the classic interview question that every candidate knows will appear at some point. So, Sophie, can you tell me a little about yourself? This moment is always a chance to create a strong first impression beyond your CV. It's where you get to connect your personality, your skills, and your enthusiasm for the role, all in one short answer. But in that instant, Sophie felt the familiar pressure. English was still not her native language, and she wanted to keep her answer safe, short, and easy. So she replied, "I'm a hard worker." That was it. 3 words. The recruiter nodded politely, wrote something in his notes, and moved on to the next question. The conversation continued, but Sophie later told me she had this sinking feeling right after saying those words. She realized she hadn't really given the recruiter anything to understand who she was. "I'm a hard worker" is not a bad statement, but it's so vague that it could come from anyone. The problem with a phrase like "I'm a hard worker" is that it doesn't tell a story. It doesn't give a picture in the listener's mind. It's like describing a restaurant by saying, "We serve food." Of course you do. But what food? What experience? What makes you different? In Sophie's case, she had years of examples to prove she was dedicated and proactive. But those words didn't show any of that. They were safe, yes, but they were also forgettable. I could see exactly why Sophie's answer fell flat. In any interview, the recruiter hears, "I'm a hard worker," over and over again. 100 candidates might say it in exactly the same way. Without something specific to support it, the phrase becomes a kind of background noise. The person listening can't visualize you in action, they can't feel your motivation, and they can't see what sets you apart from the other names on their list. When Sophie told me her story, She remembered the recruiter's neutral expression and how quickly he moved on. She said, "I was so afraid of making a grammar mistake that I stayed with something safe and easy. But now I think it sounded like I didn't prepare." And honestly, that's a very common fear for English learners in interviews. You want to avoid mistakes, so you choose short phrases. But if the phrases are too short and generic, they don't connect. Sophie also admitted that she thought the recruiter would understand her value just from looking at her CV. But here's the thing. The CV gets you into the interview, but your voice, your examples, and your energy are what convince them you are the right choice. Saying, "I'm a hard worker," without a real-life proof is like leaving a frame empty. The shape is there, but the picture is missing. I asked Sophie to imagine she was the recruiter. You ask someone, "Tell me about yourself," and they say only, "I'm a hard worker." What does that tell you about their attitude at work? What does it tell you about how they handle challenging guests? Or how they manage their time? Almost nothing. Now compare that to hearing someone say, "I'm a hard worker." For example, in my current job, I often stay after my shift to make sure last-minute arrivals get the best welcome. Immediately, you can see the person in action. You can feel their work ethic in a real situation. During her interview, Sophie had the chance to give a small example like that. But because she was focused on safety and simplicity, the opportunity passed by in seconds. And that's the part she regretted later. It wasn't that she said something wrong. It was that she didn't say enough. One thing I noticed when I listened to Sophie's side of the story was that she felt more pressure about her English level than about selling her skills. She was speaking more like a student trying to get her sentences correct than as a professional showing her experience. This is something I try to help people shift. In an interview, you are not there to take an exam in English. You are there to communicate your value. A few grammar mistakes will not destroy your chance, but saying something forgettable just might. Sophie told me that after the interview, she walked through her apartment replaying every question in her mind, thinking of better answers she could have given. It's a familiar feeling for many of us, that moment when we think of the perfect thing we should have said, but it's already too late. She thought of stories of guests she had helped, busy weekends where she went above and beyond, and times she solved problems before they grew. Every single one of these stories could have supported the phrase, "I'm a hard worker," and made it strong. But because she didn't prepare those short examples in advance, the phrase stayed plain and weak. The emotional part of Sophie's story is that she truly is extremely dedicated in her job. People who have worked with her describe her as someone who will always make sure every guest leaves happy, even if it means extra hours or finding solutions that no one else thought of. The irony is that she spent years building that reputation in Paris, but in just 3 words, she didn't communicate it to someone who could have helped her take the next big step in Dublin. Listening to her, I understood that confidence is not only about speaking English well, it's about believing that your own story is worth telling, even if your words are simple. Sophie could have shared her dedication using basic, clear English without losing the meaning. She didn't need a complicated vocabulary. She just needed to prepare a picture in the recruiter's mind, something unique to her and her experience. That conversation with her convinced me once again that we all need to think carefully about the stories behind our answers. "I'm a hard worker" may be true, but in an interview, truth alone is not enough. You have to make it visible, real, and specific, so the person in front of you remembers it. Sophie's experience is a reminder that without those details, you risk sounding like everybody else. And in the competitive world of job interviews, blending in is one of the most dangerous things you can do. I want to share with you the story of someone named Luca, a listener from Rome who recently told me about one of his job interview experiences. Luca is a creative guy. He's in his mid-30s, full of ideas, and has always had an interest in marketing. He worked for several years in Italy, managing campaigns for small local businesses, and he dreamed of taking his career to an international level. He wanted to join a bigger company, work with global clients, and, of course, improve his English by using it every day in a professional environment. One morning, while checking job postings online, Luca saw an opening for a marketing position at a company based in Amsterdam. This was exactly the kind of opportunity he was looking for. The company had a vibrant, youthful culture and was known for its creative campaigns. He imagined himself working there, brainstorming ideas with people from all around the world, and building strategies that would be seen by millions. Luca applied without hesitation. He created a clean, professional CV, wrote a short but confident cover letter, and sent it off. A week later, he was thrilled to receive an email inviting him for an interview. He prepared as best as he could. He researched the company's previous work, learned about their main clients, and practiced common interview questions in English. He told himself he would focus on showing passion because marketing is not just about technical skills, it's also about energy and enthusiasm. The day of the interview came, and Luca sat at his desk at home, ready for the video call. He wore a nice shirt, made sure the lighting was good, and tried to calm his nerves with a few deep breaths. On the screen appeared two interviewers, one from the HR department and one from the marketing team. They introduced themselves warmly, which immediately helped Luca relax a little. The conversation went smoothly at first. The interviewers asked about his past work, his approach to managing projects, and how he handled clients with different needs. Luca felt confident as he shared examples from his work in Rome, explaining how he had helped small brands increase their visibility and grow their audience. Even when he made small mistakes in English, he kept going and didn't let it stop him. As the interview moved toward the end, one of the interviewers asked if Luca had any final comments or questions. This was his chance to leave a strong impression before saying goodbye. He wanted to show them he was really interested in the role and eager to join their team. And so, with complete sincerity, he said, "I need this job." In that moment, Luca thought he was expressing dedication and motivation. To him, the phrase meant, "I really want to be here, and I'm ready to work hard." But here's the tricky part. The words we choose can sometimes send a message very different from what we intend. In professional contexts, especially in English, "I need this job" can sound a lot like desperation. It can make the listener think, this person might be more focused on their own situation than on what they can offer to the company. When Luca told me about this, I could feel his frustration. He said the interviewers smiled politely after his comment, but he imagined them maybe thinking less about his skills and more about why he needed the job so much. It's not that showing interest is wrong. In fact, employers want to see that you care about the role. The problem is that certain phrases can shift the spotlight away from your value and onto your personal circumstances. In that one sentence, "I need this job," the emotional tone went from professional enthusiasm to something that felt a little too personal. Recruiters might worry that someone who is desperate could accept the job for the wrong reasons, struggle under pressure, or be willing to take anything rather than truly choosing the position because it's the right fit. Remember, a job interview is not only about them choosing you, it's also about you choosing them. The dynamic should feel balanced. Luca told me he didn't realize this until later. At the time, he genuinely believed that being very honest about his need for the role would make the interviewers see his motivation. But after he described the moment to me, I asked him to imagine hearing the same sentence from another applicant. You are the recruiter, and an applicant tells you directly, "I need this job." How does it sound? If you're honest, your first thought might not be about their skills. It might be about their personal situation. That's the difference between intention and perception. What we mean and what others hear can be two completely different things. Sometimes, when we are under pressure or nervous, we speak from emotion without filtering through how it might sound professionally. Luca's sincerity was admirable, but in the interview environment, professionalism requires us to reframe our emotions into messages that still share our passion, but also highlight how we can contribute to the company. Employers want to hire people who are excited about the role, but also confident in their own value. What made this even more interesting was that Luca had amazing points he could have shared in that moment. He could have chosen to say something like, "I'm very excited about the opportunity to bring my ideas and experience to your team." Or, "I believe this position is a great match for my skills, and I'd be glad to contribute to your upcoming projects." While both of these still express enthusiasm, but they focus on the value he offers, not on his personal need. Looking back, Luca realized he was so concentrated on making an emotional connection that he forgot to keep the frame professional. He said, "I think I mixed up showing interest with oversharing my personal feelings." This is a very common experience, especially for people who truly care about the outcome. When we want something badly, we sometimes think saying it directly will make others see our sincerity. But in a business conversation, the safest path is to express motivation in a way that speaks to mutual benefit, what the role gives you, and what you give the role. When I think about Luca's story, I can't help but picture the small shift that could have made a big difference. The interview had gone well. He had shared good examples, shown creativity, and demonstrated a clear understanding of marketing. But that final phrase, even though it was just 4 words, left the wrong kind of echo. Words in an interview work like the closing scene of a movie. They stay in the mind when the conversation ends. A strong closing line can reinforce the image you built during the whole meeting, while a weaker or misinterpreted one can slightly blur it. I remember telling Luca that the important part here was not to feel bad about the moment, but to see it as a learning point. If he could understand why "I need this job" might sound unbalanced, he could replace it with something better next time. That's the beautiful part of communication skills. They can be practiced, adjusted, and improved. And often, the change is smaller than we think. Certain short, well-selected phrases can transform the tone of your message completely. Luca laughed when I explained that his phrase made him sound like the company was saving him rather than hiring him. He admitted that he didn't want that dynamic at all, and that it was simply a poor choice of words in a moment when he wanted to be genuine. That's why practicing professional ways to express personal enthusiasm is so important, especially in a second language. You want the warmth and the passion, but you also want to present yourself as confident and capable. His experience is a reminder that even short sentences, those little last comments we think are harmless, can change how we are perceived in an interview setting. The words you choose don't just fill space, they create impressions. And in Luca's case, one honest but unpolished sentence became the moment he remembered most from the entire interview. It stayed with him as a point of reflection for how he would speak in future opportunities, whether in Amsterdam or anywhere else in the world. When I think about Luca's interview story, I can see so clearly how a small change in his choice of words could have made all the difference. Luca's mistake wasn't about being too interested in the job. In fact, employers love to see enthusiasm. The problem was that his words put all the focus on his personal need, instead of balancing that with the value he could bring to the company. That's why I want to talk to you about replacing "I need this job" with something that communicates the same passion, but with confidence and professionalism. Let's start with one of my favorite alternatives. "I'm excited about the opportunity to contribute to your team." Simple words, clear meaning. This sentence tells the employer, "I'm looking forward to being a part of what you do," without making it sound like you are desperate. It's not too formal, but it's respectful. It also includes the important idea of contributing, that you are there to give something, not only to take something. In a professional context, this small difference in tone can change how the person across from you feels about you. Another strong option is, "I believe this role is a great fit for my skills." This sentence shifts the focus in a very smart way. Instead of talking about your own needs, you're talking about a match. Your abilities and their position fit well together. You are showing that you understand yourself and the job, and that you see a connection between the two. This creates an image of a confident candidate who knows what they bring to the table and has chosen this opportunity because it makes sense. When I explain these alternatives to people, I always stress that it's not just the words, it's the feeling behind them. If you say, "I'm excited about the opportunity to contribute to your team," but you sound unsure, whispering in a monotone voice, the effect will be lost. But if you say it with a calm smile, steady eye contact, and a voice that rises slightly when you say excited, then the words will really come alive. This is why practicing out loud is essential. Your brain and your mouth need to know how the sentence sounds together under real conditions, not just in your imagination. Think about it this way. In a job interview, the recruiter is like an audience watching a performance. Not a performance in the sense of acting or faking, but in the sense that they are receiving not only your words, but your energy, your body language, and your attitude. If you've only read the line, "I believe this role is a great fit for my skills," in your head, you won't know exactly how to make it sound natural when speaking under pressure. And when we're nervous, words we haven't practiced can come out awkward or rushed. That's why you should sit down, maybe in front of a mirror, or record yourself on your phone, and actually say these sentences several times until they feel like your own. I often give my listeners a little drill to do at home. First, write down 3 or 4 substitute phrases like these: short, clear, positive. Then, for each phrase, imagine a real situation where you might say it. For example, imagine the end of Luca's interview in Amsterdam. The interviewer asks, "Do you have any final comments?" You take a breath, smile, and say, "Yes, I'm excited about the opportunity to contribute to your team." You keep your voice even and your tone friendly. Do this several times until you could say it without reading from a paper. Then, try it again after walking around the room or after doing a small task so your mind learns to find the sentence even when you're doing something else. This builds muscle memory for your speech, which is incredibly helpful during real interviews. These positive replacements also have another benefit. They redirect the conversation toward action. "I need this job" is a closed statement. There's nothing for the interviewer to ask next. But "I'm excited about the opportunity to contribute to your team" might lead them to ask in what ways you imagine contributing, or what specific skills you would bring in. This allows you to expand on your strengths and experience, keeping the focus on your professional value. I also encourage people to add small personal touches to these phrases, while still keeping them clear and simple. For example, Luca's work in marketing could have easily been tied into the sentence. He could have said, "I'm excited about the opportunity to contribute my marketing experience to your team." Or, "I believe this role is a great fit for my skills in digital campaigns and brand strategy." This way, you are not only expressing enthusiasm, but also reminding them of what you specifically offer. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, "Ben, these sentences sound easy, but in the moment, my brain freezes." Take it. That's why I want to stress again how important it is to turn them into habits. Don't wait for the day of the interview to practice. Say them while you're making coffee. Say them when you're walking to the bus. Say them until they flow from your mouth without hesitation. In a real interview, those are the words your brain will grab first, simply because they are the ones that feel familiar. Another thing that can help is breaking the sentences into small chunks when you practice. For example, with "I'm excited about the opportunity to contribute to your team," you can practice just "I'm excited" until it feels natural and confident. Then add "about the opportunity," and then "to contribute to your team." This way, if you do feel nervous, each part of the sentence will still come out clearly because your brain knows it well. Remember, too, that your body language works with your words. If you sit upright, keep your shoulders relaxed, and lean slightly toward the camera or interviewer when you say these closing lines, it sends a physical signal of engagement and readiness. Combine that with a steady tone of voice, and you suddenly give off a much stronger, more confident energy. even if you still feel nervous inside. Interviewers often remember how a candidate made them feel, and appearing engaged and balanced is something that leaves a positive memory. When I was talking to Luca about his options for replacing "I need this job," I could see the gears turning in his mind. He started realizing that by changing just a few words, he could completely change the impression he left. He practiced the alternatives with me, and at first he seemed a little shy. But after a few attempts, he started to smile while saying them. His voice became more stable, his tone warmer, and suddenly the sentences didn't sound like something he memorized. They sounded like something he truly believed. That is exactly what we are aiming for: authenticity with professionalism. I told him, and I'm telling you now, that this is not about hiding your real feelings. If you really want a job, it's natural to feel eager and even emotional about it. But in a work context, those emotions need to be put into words that help you, not hurt you. The goal is to make the interviewer think, this person is confident, they know what they want, and they will be a strong addition to the team. Professional enthusiasm is that perfect combination of caring about the role and believing you can succeed in it. So if you remember anything from this talk, let it be this: enthusiasm is important, but enthusiasm plus value is unforgettable. "I need this job" speaks only to you and your feelings. "I'm excited about the opportunity to contribute to your team" speaks to both you and them, to the connection between who you are and what they're looking for. And "I believe this role is a great fit for my skills" shows that you're not just accepting something, you're choosing it because you know it's right for you. These small language shifts are easy to learn, but like any skill, they become powerful only when you practice them until they feel natural. Once they do, you'll find that speaking them during an interview feels less like performing and more like simply telling the truth, but in a way that gives you the best possible chance to leave a strong, confident, and lasting impression. There's something I want to make very clear, because I see so many English learners getting stuck here. In a job interview, especially one in English, your goal is not to give the fanciest, most perfect-sounding answers. Your number one goal is to be clear and positive. Clarity beats perfection every single time. Why? Because at the end of the day, the interviewer is not there to give you a grade on your grammar. They are there to decide if they can see you working with them, solving problems, and fitting into their team. And they cannot make that decision if they can't fully understand what you're saying. I've met so many learners who spend hours memorizing complex vocabulary before an interview, thinking that big words will make them sound more professional. The truth is, those big words can sometimes hurt you if you're not completely comfortable using them. Let's be honest, when you try to speak with complicated phrases you haven't practiced, you risk mixing them up, pausing too long, or losing confidence halfway through. That break in your flow is more noticeable to the interviewer than whether your adjective was impressive or outstanding. Imagine this. An interviewer asks, "Can you tell me about a time you had to work under pressure?" You could try to use a high-level vocabulary answer like, "It was a particularly strenuous situation that required an intricate balancing of priorities amidst various stakeholders." But what if you stumble halfway or forget the word stakeholders? Suddenly, you look nervous, and your message gets lost. Compare that to a simple, clear answer. "Once, we had a busy week with many urgent tasks, so I made a list of priorities and worked with my team to finish everything on time." It's direct, it's understandable, and it gives a clear picture. The second answer is far more effective, and it's at a language level any beginner or intermediate learner can master. Clarity also communicates another key quality: respect for your listener. An interviewer might be talking to several candidates in one day, listening to answer after answer. When you speak in a way that is easy to follow, you make their job easier. They don't have to ask you to repeat yourself, and they don't have to guess what you mean. That makes you stand out in a positive way. I know there's a certain temptation to try to impress people with your English level. You might think, if I use advanced words, they'll see I studied a lot. But here's the reality. Recruiters don't hire people based on how advanced their vocabulary is. They hire people who they believe can do the job and communicate well in the environment. In fact, using simple, correct sentences can make you sound more confident because it shows you're focused on sharing the idea, not showing off the language. There is a phrase I repeat often: simple is professional. In the business world, some of the most respected leaders speak in short, clear sentences. They avoid long, confusing explanations because they want their message to land instantly. You can follow the same principle in your interviews. Instead of saying, "During my tenure, I effectuated a restructuring of our operational frameworks," you can say, "I changed the way our team worked to make it more efficient." No one will think less of you for using the second sentence. In fact, they'll probably appreciate it more. Let's think about body language for a second. When you're searching for a difficult word, you tend to look up, pause, and think. The silence can feel longer than it actually is, and you might lose eye contact. The interviewer may start to worry that you don't know the answer, even if it's just a vocabulary gap. But when you use words you're comfortable with, you speak more fluidly, maintain connection, and keep the conversation moving. That confidence in delivery can sometimes outweigh the exact content of what you say. I tell English learners to imagine that they are tour guides in a city they love. You wouldn't take visitors down a confusing path full of dead ends. You'd show them the clear, direct route to the best view. In an interview, your answer is that route. If you take the interviewer on a complicated journey of long words and unfinished sentences, they might get lost. If you take them on a short, direct route with clear descriptions, they will not only understand you, they will enjoy listening to you. Let me give you a few examples of transforming advanced or overcomplicated ideas into clear, beginner-friendly language. Instead of, I endeavor to ameliorate customer dissatisfaction through proactive engagement. Say, I try to make unhappy customers feel better by talking to them quickly. Instead of, I possess a comprehensive repertoire of strategic problem-solving competencies. Say, I'm good at finding solutions to problems. Instead of, I facilitated the ideation and execution of multifaceted campaign initiatives. Say, I helped create and run different marketing campaigns. Do these simpler sentences sound less professional? Not at all. What they do is make sure that your meaning is never lost. The interviewer immediately understands what you mean and can ask you for more detail if they want it. And when they ask for more detail, you can tell a story. And stories are always more engaging than a vocabulary list. Another important point is that clarity helps you control the pace of the interview. When you use language you are comfortable with, you naturally move at a steady rhythm. You're not rushing to get through a complicated sentence before you forget it. You can pause naturally to let your words have impact. You can breathe and look at the interviewer. This makes you appear calmer and more confident, which in turn makes the interviewer more comfortable with you. Think about this. The best communicators are not the ones with the widest vocabulary, but the ones whose ideas are understood instantly. Clarity is a skill. You can work on it by practicing explaining your work, your skills, and your experiences using short, complete sentences. For example, take a common interview question like, "Tell me about a challenge you faced." Write down a 2- or 3-sentence answer without using a dictionary. Just words you know well. Then practice saying it. Ask yourself, if I were hearing this for the first time, would I understand exactly what happened? If you're worried that simple answers make you look less intelligent, I want you to remember that some of the most intelligent people I've met speak in extremely straightforward ways. They focus on the idea, not the decoration around the idea. In a job interview, you want the employer to remember your story, your skill, and your attitude, not just the one fancy word you managed to use. When preparing for an interview, I recommend a little test. Take one answer you plan to give and say it to a friend who is not in your field. Ask them to repeat back to you what they understood. If they can tell you the main point clearly, then you've succeeded. If they look confused, it's a sign you need to make the language simpler. This works especially well for people applying to technical roles, where it's easy to get lost in jargon. If you can explain something in a way anyone can understand, you'll also impress the interviewer with your communication skills. Clarity also helps reduce your own stress. When you speak with simple words, you use less mental energy trying to remember difficult terms. That leaves more brain power to focus on your posture, your tone, listening to the interviewer, and thinking about what to say next. Your confidence will grow because you'll feel in control of your message. So the next time you prepare for a job interview, don't just study lists of vocabulary. Focus on describing your skills, experiences, and achievements in the simplest, most natural way you can. Practice them until they sound smooth and clear. Make it easy for the interviewer to remember you, not because you used unusual words, but because they understood exactly what you meant, and they could see you as part of their team. As we come to the end of our time together today, I want to take a moment to remind you of the 3 little phrases we have been talking about, the ones you should avoid in your job interviews in English. They are short, they are common, and they may seem harmless at first. But now, you know how much impact they can have on the way an interviewer sees you. The first one is, "I don't know." The second one is, "I'm a hard worker." The third one is, "I need this job." Each of these phrases can create the wrong impression, not because they are rude or offensive, but because they send a message you probably don't want to send. "I don't know" can make you look like you're closing the door instead of opening a conversation. "I'm a hard worker" is so generic that it makes you sound like everyone else. And "I need this job" shifts the focus away from your value and toward your personal situation, sometimes in a way that feels unbalanced. We've worked through better ways to say what you really mean. For "I don't know," you now have alternatives like, "I'm not sure, but I can find out," or "That's a good question. I will check and get back to you." These answers still admit you don't have the complete information right now, but they keep the conversation alive and show you are proactive. They make the interviewer think of you as someone who takes initiative instead of giving up at the first sign of uncertainty. For "I'm a hard worker," we talked about adding simple, specific details that bring the statement to life. Instead of leaving it vague, you can say something like, "I always finish my tasks on time," or "I make sure my guests feel welcome." These examples are short, easy to say, and paint a picture of you in action. They help the interviewer remember you because they can actually visualize you doing the work successfully. For "I need this job," we reshaped it into sentences that express enthusiasm without sounding desperate. Things like, "I'm excited about the opportunity to contribute to your team," or "I believe this role is a great fit for my skills," make you sound confident, prepared, and interested in what you can give to the company as well as what you will receive from it. This balance is powerful. It positions you as the kind of person who chooses opportunities carefully and knows their own worth. Now, I want you to think honestly about how you speak in interview situations, or even in professional conversations in general. Which of these old phrases have you used before? Maybe you've said all 3 at one time or another. That's okay. I'm not here to make you feel bad about the mistakes you've made. I've told you stories about real people, Miguel, Sophie, and Luca, precisely because I want you to see that everyone has moments like this, even experienced professionals. The point is not to be perfect. The point is to recognize those moments and replace them with something better next time. And here's a secret. This doesn't just apply to job interviews. These alternative phrases will help you in meetings, in networking events, in casual professional chats, and even in social situations with people you want to impress. They are short, they are easy to practice, and they work in so many different contexts because they are based on clarity and positivity. That's why I want you to do something for yourself today. Not tomorrow, not next week, but today, while it's still fresh in your mind. Pick just one of the replacement phrases we talked about and say it out loud 3 times. Don't whisper it in your head. Speak it so you hear your own voice carrying the words. Feel how your mouth forms each syllable. Notice the rhythm. If you can, stand in front of a mirror or use your phone camera so you can watch your facial expression and see if your tone matches your intention. If you want to take it one step further, imagine a question you might hear in an interview, something that would normally make you nervous or unsure. Then, answer it using one of these phrases. For example, imagine the interviewer asks you about a situation you don't know much about. This is your moment to say, in a calm and professional voice, "I'm not sure, but I can find out." Maybe you even add, "I will send you more information after our meeting." Suddenly, you've turned a point of weakness into a point of strength. The more you repeat these phrases out loud, the more natural they will feel, and the more likely they will come to mind automatically when you need them. This, my friend, is how confidence is built. Not overnight, not through magic, but through small, repeated actions that train your brain and your mouth to work together. I also want to encourage you to listen to this episode more than once, especially if speaking English still feels challenging for you. The first time you listen, focus on understanding the meaning and thinking about your own experiences. The second time, try to listen and repeat some of the sentences after me, almost like a shadowing exercise. Match my pace, my tone, and my pronunciation as closely as you can. Don't worry if it's not perfect. Remember, we are going for clarity and comfort, not perfection. You may be surprised at how much progress you can make just by repeating short, clear sentences out loud every day. Over time, you won't just know these phrases. They will become part of your natural communication. And when you walk into your next job interview, you won't have to dig for them in your memory. They will be right there on the tip of your tongue, ready to help you sound calm, competent, and positive even under pressure. Before we finish, I want to remind you of something important. Every episode we do here is a step toward making you more comfortable, more confident, and more in control when you use English. Whether you are preparing for interviews, building relationships at work, or simply wanting to enjoy conversations with people from different countries, the skills you practice here will serve you in all of those situations. If today's conversation helped you see something new, or if you learned even one phrase that you can use in your next opportunity, then I have a small request for you. Take a moment right now to like this episode and subscribe to the podcast or channel, depending on where you're listening. It takes just a few seconds, but it makes a big difference. It helps other learners like you find this content so they can also grow their skills and confidence. And finally, remember this. Every time you practice one of these phrases, you are not just practicing English. You are building a stronger version of yourself. You are teaching yourself to respond with confidence instead of fear, with clarity instead of confusion, and with presence instead of hesitation. That's something worth being proud of. So take one phrase, make it yours today, and let it be the start of your next big step forward.